one of these veterans has had previous cognitive testing before entering this study. And let me go back here. If we look at the memory scores, 9 to 10 point memory change, huge changes, and on all of these the p-values are underneath. Less than 0.001, 0.026, 0.003. Stroop, color word interference, and TOVA, which are attention and concentration tests, both of them significantly improved. The post-concussion symptom questionnaire showed marked reduction in symptoms. The PTSD military checklist, this is unheard of. Highly significant, 20-point reduction on the military checklist. Perceived quality of life, similarly significant improvement, marked decrease in depression, in anxiety, and their own rating of percent back to normal. In other words, how much percent improvement have you had? All of them had significant improvement in their estimation. If we look at the actual percentage figures, full-scale IQ was a 16% change. That is just the gross number. I gave you what that translates to. Rivermead Post-Concussion Symptom Questionnaire, 40% reduction in symptoms, 30% reduction in PTSD symptoms, 40% improvement in quality of life on a questionnaire, 51% reduction in depression scores, 38% reduction in anxiety scores, which correlates very nicely with the PTSD scale. PTSD is a type of anxiety disorder. And their percent back to normal rating improved by between 33 and 90%. When we looked at the SPECT data, and this adds an anti-placebo argument to anything that you could make previously about this, here is the percent of the coefficient of variation. In other words, that change from the wide bell-shaped curve before hyperbaric oxygen on the SPECT counts to the narrow, more normal one. Here is the pre-study showing, at least in the gray matter areas, different percent coefficient of variation, and the white matter one. The blue is the baseline. After a single hyperbaric treatment, there is a very significant change in that bell-shaped curve. In other words, a normalization of the SPECT counts. After 40, the change was about halfway between. And this is something that we had expected. In the white matter, though, it was the identical thing except for the one white matter at 60 degrees, which is towards the frontal lobe. It was significantly changed after one treatment and after 40. Well, here is an example of that SPECT data. And down here is that coefficient of variation, the standard deviation as a percentage of the average or mean of the counts per pixel. And in every single one of these, this is for the 30-degree gray matter one, but in every one of these, this is significant. At the time of this presentation in March, I treated 25, and turns out we're up to 28, as I mentioned earlier. Of the first 16, we have 15 complete data sets. 14 of the 15 have had symptomatic and physical exam improvement. The group pre- and post-cognitive and quality of life results are showing significant changes on composite parameters. Further analysis is pending. The functional imaging is also showing significant change, and we're going to have more of this. We just completed, that was the left hemisphere. We just completed the opposite hemisphere, and it's consistent with the left hemisphere. And the image analysis is consistent with the cognitive testing, the quality of life results, and the symptom and physical exam changes. So the conclusions of this little study so far are that active duty and retired military veterans with blast-induced chronic post-concussion syndrome plus minus PTSD have shown significant symptom, physical exam, cognitive, and quality of life improvements with a 30-day course of hyperbaric oxygen at 1.5 atmospheres for 60 minutes, twice a day, 5 days a week. Now, this is not the ideal way I like to do this, but we were constrained by time. Number two, there were significant changes on high-resolution brain blood flow imaging after a single hyperbaric treatment. There was no significant or permanent side effects, and this shows promise in the treatment of these conditions. Well, I want to thank the people who helped over the years bring all of this about. Dr. William Duncan, the ex-Secretary of the Army, Martin Hoffman, Director William Chatfielder, ex-director of the Selective Service Agency, Dr. Robert Mosieni, Washington, D.C., Dr. John Pizzullo, the statistician, Juliette Lucarini, nurse, and my wife, who helped coordinate all of this, Claire Aubrey, our research assistant, who screened all the veterans. We had support from Steve Reimers. And then to all of these people. As I told you, our funding was promised by the military. There's been active inhibition and obstruction of our ability to try to get this funding, and as a result, it has had to come from a number of people. Thank you. Now, I want to put one little addendum on here. What's the future? Well, possibly a randomized prospective trial with 25 subjects in each group. That's the congressional appropriation. Unfortunately, we've been told by the Army Surgeon General that despite the Congress and the will of the United States citizenry, I'm not going to get this. It's going to be held up. We'll see. We hope that's not true. There's a national multi-center study that we've started under the International Hyperbaric Medical Foundation, and it is based on the LSU IRB approved study, and we're going to be using Bayesian statistics. You're going to hear about this at another presentation in the future. But it is using a more modern statistical design, now accepted by the FDA and in fact endorsed by it, used for many, many cancer trials. Where everyone gets treatment. There is no placebo group, and it will be based on all the data we've generated so far. We're in the process of trying to get that funding funded, and I'll tell you how in a minute. We're hopeful that there is going to be additional progress with this at our own institution through institution of a new department. Here are some references for you. You can look up some of this data. And the last thing I am going to say is we have a bill before Congress right now. It's the HBOT, or excuse me, it's the TBI Treatment Act. And what it calls for is reimbursement of treatment for traumatic brain injury if the results of treatment are positive. It's not for hyperbaric oxygen or any specific treatment. It's for any treatment that you can prove is effective, but it has to be under an institutional review board approved protocol. So through Western IRB and through the International Hyperbaric Medical Foundation, we have the NBER trial, which is starting. And we're hoping that this bill is going to help fund the treatment of these veterans. Thank you very much. And we hope that in the near future, this is a therapy that's going to come to not only our injured veterans, brain injured veterans, but the American public and eventually the rest of the world. Have a good day. In addition to the people on the slide at the World Congress that I acknowledged and thanked for their participation in bringing this pilot study to fruition, I would also like to thank General Lori Sutton, Dr. Sutton, who was in charge of traumatic brain injury and psychological health for the DoD. Dr. Sutton made a significant and concerted effort to allow us to rapidly proof HBOT 1.5 with studies that would have been funded, and she was unfortunately thwarted by her superiors. I've just learned that she has been forced to resign, but we'd like to thank her for her efforts. The last one I wanted to show you is the Volume 1, Issue 2, April-June of this year issue of Wound Care and Hyperbaric Medicine. In here is the chronology that I gave you in the first part of this presentation as recited by Dr. Duncan and his involvement with the federal government and military medicine and his efforts to help us bring this to the American public. And I encourage you to read it. Thank you.